Paul Prickett is the CEO of Flying Head and brings a wealth of firsthand knowledge of the ins and outs of keeping a company moving and minimizing hiccups along the way. Dorothy Willis is the Human Resources Director for JMT Consulting and will be contributing today based on her extensive experience in HR management, employment law, talent acquisition, and strategic planning. And Julian Schrenzel is the president and CEO of DyNexus Recruiting and Staffing, and your moderator today for our final webinar of 2023 entitled, Hey, ChatGPT, Find Me a New Employee, as we discuss various aspects of recruiting and hiring challenges in 2023 and take a look to the future, trying to predict what 2024 might have in store for us. Take it away, Julian.
Thank you, Mark. What an awesome intro, man. I should have had you been doing that a long time. You sound like the perfect radio host, which is great. So thank you, Mark. Okay, Jenny, Paul, Dorothy, thank you for joining. Welcome. This is going to be a really interesting conversation that I think is going to be very helpful to our industry at large. And so I'm really pleased. Thank you for joining us today on our webinar.
Thank you for having me.
For having us.
Absolutely. Let us jump right in by starting off, as Mark said, to the audience out there listening. This is an interactive webinar. This is not meant to be us talking and you listening. I truly rely, I have some questions that we have come up with that we know to be of interest to a lot of the channel, to a lot of the community, but nobody knows what the best questions that you have are except you. So I ask you, audience, as you are going through any questions that you have throughout this entire thing, the last portion of this webinar will be dedicated to your questions, which we will bring out and pose to the panelists of your choice, or as an all play to all panelists, that they can answer your questions directly. I ask you at any point in this time, drop it in the chat. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you can put it right into the comments of the event here on LinkedIn. And Mark will be watching those. And we will have a special section where we will ask your questions of our panelists. So please don't hesitate to put in your questions throughout this presentation. We're going to move right into question one. So the first question we have for these panelists, these are for all panelists who are interested in answering and have some information here that could be interesting. What have been your biggest talent recruitment challenges this year? And what would you like to, or would you like to do something differently to reduce or eliminate this challenge in the coming 2024? So who would like to start off with just talking about what's been the biggest roadblock or the biggest challenge that you have faced this 2023?
Well, I can start because I sort of have two different perspectives as the former CEO of Kensium for part of this year, and then now the CEO for Flying Head. And in Kensium's world, being an Acumatica focused ERP side, talent was and continues to be difficult to come by. There are not a lot of people who really understand Acumatica, and there's not a lot of people entering the Acumatica community as new users. Although there is a huge number of people who are entering it as, I guess, users versus knowledgeable people. So that was a question of finding talent. In the similar things happen in the Flying Head side, where we're working with Salesforce. The talent, there's a significant talent pool, but the talent pool tends to be more senior, more educated, more knowledgeable. And so if you're looking for someone who's more junior, someone who has less experience but is starting to learn, they're just hard to find. And they were hard to find on both sides, but that's kind of our focus in the Flying Head side. And so it's just a continual challenge where everyone says, oh, there's a ton of resources these days because of the layoffs, but they aren't necessarily the resources that you really need.
Interesting. So it's that age-old problem of the supply-demand, where the demand is outstripped supply for that.
Yep.
How about Jenny? How about you with LBMC? What have you found in your experience this year?
Yeah, I want to echo what Paul said. The quality of the candidate is really important, and we have very specific, resource needs, needing, more senior, oftentimes more senior level candidates. And within my group, that's a project manager that has specifically led and successfully delivered ERP solutions. Not specifically or has to have, our product, experience leading software products that we deploy. That would be great. But just like ERP solutions out there in the market, it could be Microsoft, it could be Salesforce, it could be NetSuite, but just having that experience managing a medium to large size ERP implementation from beginning to end. Oftentimes we find folks that have only got experience, within an implementation for 6 months or 12 months. And we're looking for someone that has delivered the entire breadth of that implementation. So finding those niche candidates, quality candidates, has always been a challenge for us.
Thank you, Jenny. That makes sense. Dorothy, I know you have a cold and you're fighting that, so we're going to take it easy on you today. If there's anything you feel like adding to that might be salient for you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for saying that. I was just thinking, I really agree with what they both said. JMT Consulting, really for the past 32 years, has just really, we focus only on large nonprofits. And while our primary product that we service, that we sell and service right now, is Sage Intacct, we have many existing clients, some of the existing clients have been in business with us for 32 years, have much older systems. And it's not unusual for us to convert, this is really true, a nonprofit who may be using QuickBooks, and in some cases are still using an Excel spreadsheet. So we even have a niche market that requires Sage 300 CRM experience. So it runs the gamut. And to both what Paul and Jenny both said is that while sometimes I think we need that more experienced person, it's an affordability issue. We don't, because we're a smaller company, we don't have the luxury of bringing in, quote, trainees, because even though we bring people in, sometimes even though they're Sage certified, it takes us so long to get them up to speed from the nonprofit perspective that it just becomes they're not revenue producing. And so I think our challenge is just finding that good balance somewhere in between, finding people that are hungry, have good attitudes, how much time and money we can afford to take to train them. And we train them for the world, unfortunately, because then we end up losing them to other places. So I think that's been a real challenge. And I think it will continue to be for 2024.
Understood. Does anybody here have any particular thoughts on anything in specific that you do in your recruiting process, in your hiring process, in your retention process of employees that you would like to do distinctly different next year than you did this year?
I mean, I think our process on both sides of the fence has been as successful as we could hope it to be. I think the branch out that we are looking to do through Flying Head, and Kenzie may be doing similar things through 2024, is actually teaching juniors, bringing people into the ecosystem. Again, the ecosystem is kind of cannibalizing itself because there aren't enough people in it. And so finding a way to bring in people who don't have specific experience that you're looking for and teach them. And I realize, yes, there's a need and a demand for senior resources that you can't teach a senior resource. But if someone doesn't teach the first layer, they're never going to become a senior resource.
Absolutely.
It couldn't help but think about that too when someone had said, like, it sucks that you train these people just to leave and go off and leave. And I would like to think that you also you're a beneficiary of that, because when you hire a senior consultant, someone turned them into a senior and they lost them to somewhere. And maybe I guess my Pollyannish view of this is like, I hope that people will see maybe this is a community effort. We all put in by training people, and we all receive by hiring senior level people, and we work together. Though I do recognize it really, really, really hurts to be poached from. And so I see where that's a hard pill to swallow, I would guess. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to move on to the next question I have, which is this. Let's talk a little about AI, as if not enough people were talking about it today, but really particularly as it relates to hiring and recruitment in the mid-market ERP space, because that's what all of you have done in much of your careers. Do you see AI more as a threat or more as an asset to you and your professional goals in 2024?
Well, for me personally, I always see anything as an asset. Change is always an asset. And if change is the type of change that could replace what I do or what the company I work with does, that's just another adjustment that has to be made. Things keep moving forward, which is what keeps things interesting. So I never see anything like this as a threat. It's just change, and change is always, in the end, change is virtually always good, not always good.
I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I consider it as a part of your toolkit, right? And obviously you want to start with your HR strategy and determine where it fits in. Yeah, AI is not going to replace that soft skills that you get out of face-to-face or virtual interviews, right? But one simple application that we've already started using is brainstorming how to create new job descriptions or update job descriptions, for example. So brainstorming is a wonderful way to begin to utilize artificial intelligence.
Yep.
I get that.
I totally agree with that. It was one of the kind of handy things about AI is it'll help you get the first foundational piece, or even do some cleanup of things like, creating a job description, which is in most places, it's like pulling teeth to get job descriptions written. It's like documentation. Nobody really wants to do it.
Yeah, and it actually, to me, it's even bigger than that. Is that what happens many times is we get job descriptions, even in the ERP world, and they become status quo. I mean, nobody changes them. And we go back and look at them, and 3 years ago, this is what we were needing. Well, that's changed dramatically. And yet we are continually trying to recruit for a job that has so evolved and changed that we're behind it. So, I mean, that's a great place to start, is just to say, let's go back and take a look this is 2024, take a look at what we were looking for 3 years ago and what we need today, and where that skill set has changed. And do we need somebody at a stronger skill set? So it's an excellent tool.
Yeah. I think I see as in the recruiting side of this industry, I think there's a really good thing, but the way I see it, it's kind of like it starts in the wrong direction and turns around, in that AI, I hear a lot of people feeling like AI is going to, make it to where you don't, touch contactless hiring. Like AI bots are every job seeker is going to be happy to interview with a bot. And then all you're going to have to do is just sit there and hire the right people that come through this automated technology, where, as Jenny was just pointing out, this is not going to replace the soft touch, the humanistic elements, the connection, that fundamental connection between people. It won't. But having these tools, also, some people will try that, and I think we will see that there are parts of it that are really, really important for human beings to be active in. And I think it'll drive home that when people see the power of human connection, so I think in the end, the AI tools, the tools that are out there that are automating things, will find their place where they work, and then we'll find a place where they don't work. I'll bet you that's probably true in your industry too, because that personal touch is important with your customers.
I mean,
Yeah.
one of the biggest things that that became prominent in the last 3 or 4 years was that culture matters, company culture matters, and employees were and still continue to leave companies where they don't feel included, they don't feel part of something, where the culture is not something that aligns with them. And an AI interview process is not going to do anything to lay out what that culture is and give people a feel for what it is. And it will actually probably turn people off to it. If your company is about trying to bring together people as human beings to work together as human beings and have an experience together as human beings, that means that it's about human beings. And if your interview process doesn't reflect that, then you're going to miss candidates, and at the same time, you're inappropriately portraying who your company really is.
That's a really good point. Really good point, Paul. Do anybody have any plans? Are there any particular tools that you have seen that you would like to, or you plan to install into your recruiting or hiring processes in 24 or in the future? Like, is there anything you've seen that really looks like that's something I might be able to really take advantage of?
Well, we've already started using chat GPT for, like, as mentioned, for brainstorming and such as the job descriptions. And so that'll go on into 2024 for us.
Excellent.
Yeah, we've done the same.
Yep.
And it seems like a really smart place to apply it. I haven't seen anything on the recruiting side that's really interesting outside of that yet, but it doesn't mean it's not out there.
Absolutely. I'm going to move on to this next question, which is in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So DEI has been a really major focus we have seen in hiring this year. I'm wondering, how do you three see this impacting our mid-market ERP industry today? And how would you like to see it impact our industry as we move into the future?
Well, I'm I kind of come from a slightly different background on this, which is weird for me to say, being average middle-aged white male, but I don't have a college degree, and there are not a lot of people in my space at my level that can say that. And it certainly has had its set of challenges in not having a college degree, but it hasn't prevented me from being successful. And I think one of the things that we miss a lot in the way that we look at things these days, and especially in the IT side and the ERP side, is we're very focused on, well, do they have a college degree? And some of your best diversity can come from ignoring that and saying, well, I don't really care if they have a college degree. What I care about is, what do they know? How do they think? How do they work? How do they behave? Because you can be successful in the technology space without a college degree. It's really not, it's not that it's not helpful, but there's certainly as much or more that's to be learned by actually working in the technology pieces than there is that you're going to get out of your 4-year degree, or 5 or 6 years, or however long you spent. And I think part of the DEI initiative that I think can be really, really good for the market is if we as people in the space start looking beyond the narrow view that we have of, well, we've got to have somebody with a college degree. It probably needs to come from a semi-prominent college. You know, all of that filtration process that we've been using. I don't think it's valuable to us, and I don't think it's valuable to diversity.
Really good point, Paul.
I think that I was thinking about our DEI strategy just as a company, and I think it has evolved over time as our organization has progressed. You know, we can't remain static. That's the thing. Because every company that we're talking about today, every one of us represent a company that's ever changing. I was thinking earlier today that, you know, COVID was a great a good example of an outside stressor that really impacted, you know, DEI strategies and the goals and all that we had. But I think we try to work as a company to kind of start with an inclusive culture. I think in the ERP world, and I've probably Mark and I have had conversations, maybe he doesn't even remember it, but you know, as we struggle to try to hire people, is looking at candidates that are super qualified and yet have some type of cultural issue where they can't be understood, or we have a difficulty with whether or not they can work with clients. And so I've tried to change my perspective as an HR director in recruiting to say, maybe I just need to listen better. And I'm trying to get the organization to, when I look at the broad base of our company right now, and not only our company, but the clients that we represent, I mean, it's from one spectrum to the other. And so I'm trying to get us as a company to be more communicative about the differences in our cultures and the differences in who we are, and to celebrate those differences, not to separate us and to stand out. And you know, I think with an inclusive culture, if you pour enough water into a leaky bucket, you know, it's just going to keep on leaking. So we've tried to look at hiring. You know, if you keep on just hiring talent, and it's diverse, and you're not doing something to keep it engaged, you're not going to retain it. That's where I think is the biggest challenge for us, is that retention effort, is being able to retain people that bring differences to us, because we all to be able to think differently and to be able to see things differently. And certainly the client base that we support, I mean, it's just from one spectrum to the other. And so it's really important that our employees and the people that that represent us as a company have that open-mindedness and that culture to be able to accept people with differences. So it's something that we constantly work on, but it's a challenge. And it's caused me, honestly, as an HR director, it's helped me to rethink about my recruiting. And sometimes I think we have practices and some things inside of us that we don't even know that's there. And it's like beginning to start kind of peeling away at that onion and saying, these are things that are not as important. Just as Paul mentioned, with the college degree, is that really critical to it? So I think it all goes into one place.
Absolutely. Thinking about the age portion of DEI, I want to ask you a question on people's minds around millennial workforce. This is an area of a lot of conversation. And the question is, how has the increasing shift to a millennial workforce affected you as hirers and affected your company in its functioning, in its culture, and our industry at large? So there are really kind of three levels. How has the 20, 30 something workforce, you know, the retiring of the boomers and the Gen X is moving up, and the millennials coming in? I'm wondering if anybody has any insights on that.
Well, I think in many ways it also contributes to some of the other things that we were talking about earlier, with the lack of resources, and the shift in their approach towards a lot of them's approach towards work has meant that things that are not immediately gratifying, things that are not immediately available to be high income, things that are not immediately interesting, are not things that they pursue. And so we see less and less people entering these careers that really are very interesting, but you have to put effort into it to get to the other side. Right. And so I think it's a large contributor to the decrease in the number of resources that we have available to us that are less here.
You know, we really have 5 generations of workforce. I mean, when you think about it, we've got the Gen Xers, we've got the Gen Zs, and they fundamentally think differently. And one of the things that we've seen, many of I look at across our spectrum of employees, and we have only about 50 people across the United States. But I look at those, and we have quite a few of those are millennials that are in leadership now. They lead a department or a function. One of the things that I've seen about the differences, which is kind of neat, is that, and it fits right into our culture, is that millennials typically believe that any organization should serve a greater purpose than just achieving revenue. And that's kind of a hard, when you're trying to focus toward revenue and sales, but they believe they want to see something bigger and better at what we're doing for the community. And of course, within our whole mission is about helping that nonprofit save one life at a time, whatever that is. But I think it demonstrates that purpose, but it's working with that group of people and then working with the Gen Z. I just had a lady say to me the other day in hiring, I'm concerned that this person won't stay with us. Well, they probably won't, because they have their needs are different. And we know that it's being able to look as a recruiter and looking at that person and that group of people, and just as Paul just said, it's that taking that person that doesn't have as much skill and training them, and making it valuable enough that you can retain them, and to be able to show, but you're training them for someone else, but you're training them for society. And it's that bigger picture sometimes I think we lose sight of. So focus.
Right. It's also about giving, regardless if it's the millennials or the folks that are getting close to retirement, finding something that they can connect with to give them a sense of purpose, right? I mean, ultimately. And obviously in the technology industry, if you have a candidate that's really interested in non-for-profit, then maybe that may not be the best fit for them. Or maybe technology is a good fit, and maybe they just need to work on projects that support non-for-profit organizations to give them that sense of purpose. So it's just building that connection and that purpose for that candidate.
Yeah. What do you all think about, I mean, we know that our work for this industry tends to come from a more homogenous past. We have a lot of the same kinds of people. And I'm wondering, what do you see happening to our industry going forward? Maybe my question really is this, like, I think the obvious answer to the question is, yeah, diversity is better. We need young workforce because they're the workforce of tomorrow. We need diversity because they can connect with our customers and meet the needs of a diverse industry, a diverse world we live in. All of those are kind of obvious. But, I'm a recruiter, and I've talked to a lot of colleges and organizations of higher education. And one thing that I see as a prevailing truth in the colleges that I have spoken with is that there really isn't a drive to attract students to the life of an ERP consultant. To the world of ERP is just not sexy, like being a game developer, working on artificial intelligence or robotics or aerospace is. And I wonder, like, of course we want that diversity, but I wonder, does anybody have any thoughts as to what would it take in order for us to truly feel confident that we are attracting the workforce that's gonna bring this industry into the future in the most powerful way?
I think that it's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen the way we want it, or the way we kind of think about it necessarily off the top of our heads. There is a gap. There is no question that there is a gap, and there is a big enough gap that that means that it's going to get filled somehow. And the way it's getting filled right now, effectively, well, actively is probably a better way to say it. It's not necessarily effective yet. offshore companies, offshore groups are educating offshore resources very, very aggressively to fill those gaps. And so we're going to get diversity because the only resources, or the majority of the resources that are going to be available to us are going to be offshore resources, which inherently is diverse. Maybe not, you know, they're still heavily male populated in many of those locations, but not always. But business fills gaps, and as a global business structure, we tend to think of the gap as a problem that has to be solved in the United States. And if we want to solve it in the United States, then I think we need to have more pain and suffering before people are really going to start to try and solve it in the United States. In the meantime, it's absolutely going to get filled by offshore.
Yeah.
And we can't just focus on the technology side, right? There's the human and process side really is the root of what we're trying to transform for businesses, right? And that may be a finance, a student that's studying accounting and finance. That may be a business major. And so building off that interest of that business degree and interest, that's where technology comes in to support that, right? And so if you've got that background within those areas, wherever your major is, potentially you may naturally start learning more about those technologies that can support and automate the process or area that you have your degree in.
You know, I've gone to a lot of the trade events of our industry this past year, and one of the things that occurred to me is there's a really good indicator of the culture of our industry by what is the content of our trade events. And I find that a lot of the trade events have a lot of talk of technology, talk of business process, but what seems to me like it would be interesting, and that seems to lack in my feeling, is that sense of like, let's have to have content that is transformational for human beings, that is about leadership and about collaboration and about human potential. The things that often you find TED Talks about that are just like they're just above just the regular content of technology and process and business related stuff. And I wonder if a focus change from on the business to on success and on the future might be an interesting pivot that we're going to see coming in our industry more and more.
I definitely think that would excite and give folks new to the workforce that excitement and energy that it definitely deserves, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Good. So I'm going to move on to the last, because I know there are audience questions. I want to move forward to question 5, which is the final prepared question we have, which is, as you look into your crystal ball, what do you think are the biggest challenges that face partners in the ERP CRM space this coming year? What do you think they are? And this doesn't necessarily have to be related to hiring. This could be anything. What do you think that what will be the largest challenge for the partner channels of all the ERPs and CRMs that we work in this coming year?
Well, there's a trend that's been happening for about a year, a little longer than a year now, that there doesn't seem to be an end to, but creates a lot of challenges for anybody in this industry, and frankly, outside of this industry, anybody who is working in a complex sale, large complex sale, and that is there's a lot of uncertainty in the business world. Nobody really knows where things are going to go. There's not a lot of confidence in where things are going to go, and the result of that is that people are taking significantly longer to make impactful decisions. So instead of being a 3-month cycle to sell a new ERP or CRM solution to a company, it might be 6 months on average now. And that's a huge challenge because that changes your sales force, or how long your sales force is around, how your sales force actually works with everyone. It changes your workflow. It changes how long you can plan on, okay, well, that deal, I should need to start staffing for it in this much time. It really changes the business entirely and how it functions. And it seems such a small thing, but it has such a wide impact. And I don't see that going away in 2024. Hopefully eventually it does, but that's the thing that I've seen has had the largest impact on the companies that I've been talking to that deal in this kind of an industry.
Interesting. Thank you, Paul. How about you, Jenny or Dorothy? What are you guys seeing?
Now, I agree with him. That's one of the things that we we're already having that discussion, particularly in view of the things that are happening around the world, is that clients are they're beginning to scale back. Maybe not just not so much as saying so, but they're making more deliberate decisions, and they're slowing that process. And so it affects your staffing, and it affects everything that your sales force, how long you keep them around, what the implementation time is. And I agree with Paul. I don't see that changing in 2024. It's I think the whole ERP, the world of CRM, ERP will substantially continue to change as we start talking about integration. I would not be surprised. We deal with some companies that are more, I call them more of a siloed type company. I think those are going to go by the wayside of companies that deal with much more larger ecosystems and are much more friendly. And we're beginning to see that with our clients, because as we do that integration. So I think that in and of itself is going to change. It's going to change the world of the business world. And then as we have to stagger those time frames a lot longer, it's just the payoff is going to be longer at the end. And it's just going to cause us some challenges of being able to staff and train and lead and all the processes that go into place.
Got that.
All right,
Thank you,
now,
Jenny.
I'll echo on that. So, I mean, we definitely have seen a shift ever since the pandemic, right? And so things have picked up somewhat, but at the end of the day, customers are trying to do more with less.
Right.
Which actually puts more value on the technologies that they're implementing to automate and transform their businesses with less employees or staff to support their business. And so it's the other side, right? So you have to balance the two. While implementation life cycles and schedules may last a little longer because it's taking the customer a little bit more time to get through their journey, to get through their business transformation and change to be successful. But at the end of the day, 2024 is going to be a little bit more of the same, and just focusing on ways to get that customer through that transformation as quickly as possible to get them to the other side, so they can see that benefits realization of their implementation.
Excellent comment. Thank you, Jenny. I want to now go to questions, because I believe there are some questions, and Mark's going to be fielding those questions. So audience, those of you who are watching, continue to write your questions into here. This is the point where we're going to be responding to those. So please write in now if you haven't. And we're going to get started on that. So Mark, would you like to field those and share those with our panelists?
Absolutely. And again, if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to type them in the comments section and we'll try to get to as many as we can. We got one here starting off with one regarding salaries in ERP and tech. A couple years ago during pandemic times and the Great Resignation, we saw a spike in tech salaries, both to attract new talent and to hopefully keep employees from leaving. This last year's salary increases were more on par with a traditional increase. Have you seen any lingering effects of higher salary demands, and have you had to make any budgetary adjustments to account for higher salary demands?
Wow, that's a well thought out question.
So the answer is yes and yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, 100%. I don't see anything, but who could have predicted the spike that occurred in 2020 and all those things. But I don't see anything on the immediate horizon that's going to cause anything to drastically shift in one direction or another. And so everyone who's developed their budgets, even for 2023, developed them around what we were expecting the salaries were going to be, and salaries were relatively, as it was stated by the questionnaire, relatively stable as far as their growth in 2023. And my gut is they'll stay this, that'll continue as the trend through 2024. But any adjustments that you've made, hopefully you've already made them because you've already been dealing with them for well over 12 months.
Right, and it's just not salaries that candidates are interested in. They're interested in remote and or hybrid. Working from home, only going into the office once or twice a week, or remote only. So it's not just driven based off of that salary as well.
Yeah.
Work-life balance is important to more and more candidates. Family comes first, and having that flexibility to balance work and family is important to many.
All right, got another one here. What advice would you give to somebody who is between 5 to 10 years into their career? They work with an ERP, but not directly in ERP technology, and they're kind of looking to make a career shift into ERP specific work. So for example, somebody who maybe accountant or CPA who they use a system like Sage Intacct, but they don't implement it or directly work with that ERP, but they're familiar with reports and tools within it.
I guess it depends on how much they know about it, but I mean, if you want to get into the implementation side of any ERP solution, gaining some base knowledge, and especially already having exposure and experience from a true customer's perspective, at that point, it's literally knocking on people's doors. And I don't mean like, oh, it's an endless supply of doors. Like, pick 3 companies that you think you're interested in, call them up and talk to some people, and probably one of 3 of them will offer you an opportunity.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in too. I will tell you that, and I would not have said this probably 2 or 3 years ago, but some of the most valuable employees that we have today are users of a product. They have not been trained in it, but they come to us with a totally different perspective. It helps us to understand and come away with a different viewpoint of just processes. And they have, by taking them as a user, bring them in-house, and then actually training on, as I said earlier, we specifically are focusing on Sage Intacct, but focusing on all the features and benefits of that program. It's just made them a better user, but they have that unique perspective they bring to it that many of us don't have, because we've not ever been a user of a product. We've just implemented. So it's don't give up on it. I mean, I think Paul's advice is good, is, find 3 companies that are really strong in it. Sell what sell the attitude, sell what the ability is, and by all means, just keep getting some training on it, looking for opportunities there.
Yeah, and I would echo that. On the softer side, you definitely need to be a people person and a problem solver. So if you are more of an introvert, you're going to definitely need to stretch yourself and be prepared to do so, because you'll have to take yourself out of the comfort zone. So it's training plus building those competencies.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Dorothy, that some of the most valuable people that we had at Kensium and that I've seen in the industry are people who start from the users. I guess a different way to say it is diversity doesn't necessarily, it means any kind of diversity. And diversity in understanding the technology and how it works from a different perspective is just as valuable.
Very definitely.
There's one I noticed out there, one question that would be a clarification question that needs to be asked. Paul, they say that they understand, they've heard you talk about flying head, and they were asking, are you still CEO at Kensium, and what is flying head? So I think that might need to take a moment, if you wouldn't mind clarifying.
Sure. I am no longer the CEO of Kensium. A friend of mine and one of the original founders of Kensium has taken over that chair. Flying Head is a new company that kind of officially launched about a month ago, that specializes in Salesforce contracting, specifically geared towards administrative and base level programming work. So not on the Acumatica side, on the Salesforce side.
Thank you. Got that. Good. Cool. Mark, do you see anything else coming in?
I do. This one's actually related to something Jenny just touched on that might have inspired the question that came up. Another thing that came out of the pandemic was a shift in priorities. Even though salaries did spike, consistently we saw that salaries were deemed lower in importance, and more immediate benefits like work-life balance, culture fit, medical, dental, vision, things that could be utilized immediately, as opposed to like investments and longevity and things like that. Have you seen this in your work, and has your company made shifts in benefits offerings to accommodate this?
Yes, obviously being a technology organization, we definitely had the opportunity to provide that. Obviously, we still have travel and some remote, client on-site travel, but majority of our workforce is hybrid and works from home, and that's worked very well for the employees.
We have a bricks and mortar location in Tennessee, but we only have about 5 to 7 people that are in hybrid mode there. Most of the rest of our organization is remote, all over the United States. And when we're dealing with implementations, with sales, with implementations, with client follow-up, we find that we can do that very remotely. But you're right, it's even when I'm looking and doing recruiting, one of the challenges is finding people that are willing to do that. That we have a hard time, believe it or not, we have a harder time finding people to come into the hybrid situation than we do just totally remote, because we've gotten very comfortable with that. But we have certainly expanded our benefits. Being a smaller company, we have to compete with larger organizations, as most of us do. And we've really had to look at expanding our benefit offerings, our holiday schedules, adding floating holidays, again, trying to account for cultural and diversity. And we've done that. We've just finished preparing something that will go into 2024 for that. So it's very much about work-life balance and about finding that good cohesive effort.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of little things that add up. You mentioned floating holidays, and It seems like a small thing, but why, there's holidays that are governmental holidays, 4th of July, so on and so forth. But why should the rest of them be dictated by the company? Right?
I agree.
What? And let people take the holidays that matter to them from their background, whether that's religious or personal or anything else. And I think it's a small thing, but it's a question of doing all of those small things that add up to the bigger picture. I don't think anybody, I never heard of anything that was like, we'll do this and this solves everything. It's like, no, look at it as a comprehensive. How does this create a comprehensive environment that allows an individual to be respected as who they are as an individual,
Regardless of what their beliefs and culture is. And believe it or not, that's best practices. I mean, did a lot of consulting before I joined JMT, and a lot of companies, clients I've talked to is that they've gotten so accustomed to having a flat holiday schedule that does not meet the needs. And people would complain, well, why are we not taking Good Friday? Well, why should I have that choice? Why should I have to make that choice? So the best practices today in HR is give people the flexibility of being able to pick and choose which days that are important to them without having to explain why.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Interesting. Well, this has been really interesting. Mark, are there any other ones that we want to add here that we've seen, or have we exhausted our audience with this?
We have covered the topics.
Awesome. Good. Well, I want to personally have our representative, this well-known millennial, thank you, audience, for coming and joining us. Paul, Jenny, Dorothy, just thank you three for your knowledge and sharing and the time today. We really appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Julia. It's been great to be here.
Absolutely. All right. And thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Great day.